Admit it, the strange tale of Depsey the rabbit. Chapter 7. Chuck's growing suspicions. The poker game kept replaying in Chuck's mind like a broken film reel, the same horrifying moments stuck on repeat. Depsey's face draining of all color at the mention of Mr. Muffins, the violent scrape of his chair against the tavern floor, the way he'd fled into the night as if something was chasing him. Chuck's basement apartment felt smaller than usual in the pre-dawn darkness. His nervous pacing wearing a path in the cheerful yellow carpet between his research desk and the kitchen alcove. The walls were covered with his charts and timelines, audience behavior patterns, missing performer data, broadcasting theory excerpts from Professor Gosling's work. But tonight they looked less like harmless academic curiosity and more like evidence of something terrible. A sharp knock at his door made him jump, his yellow surface practically humming with anxiety. "Chuck, are you awake? I saw your lights on." Lucy's voice carried its own strain of worry. He opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, still wearing her elegant evening wrap, but with her usual composure noticeably frayed. Her porcelain surface reflected the harsh corridor lighting in fractured patterns that made her look as unsettled as he felt. "I couldn't sleep either," she said, stepping inside without invitation. "That conversation at rehearsal the other day. Chuck, the way Depsey looked at Mr. Mystery and Dr. Dinglegreen wasn't normal. That was terror. Real terror." Chuck nodded grimly, gesturing toward his kitchen table where his notebook lay open to pages of carefully recorded observations. "Something terrible happened tonight, Lucy. I wish you'd been there to see it for yourself." Lucy settled into the chair across from him, her golden crown catching the overhead light as she leaned forward with concern. "Tell me everything. But first, Chuck, did you see the way those two men spoke to each other at rehearsal? Mr. Mystery and Dr. Dinglegreen. They weren't just business acquaintances. They were coordinating something." "What do you mean?" Chuck asked, momentarily distracted from his poker game story. The way Dr. Dinglegreen deferred to Mr. Mystery, like he was reporting to a superior. And Mr. Mystery's comment about talent evaluation. "Chuck, I think that man is more than just an investor. I think he's running some kind of operation, and Dr. Dinglegreen works for him." Chuck felt a chill run down his spine. That would explain what happened at the poker game tonight. Lucy, when Blinky mentioned Mr. Muffins, just mentioned his name. Depsey completely fell apart. "Mr. Muffins." Lucy's voice dropped to a whisper. "The performer who disappeared 20 years ago?" "The same one." Depsey looked like he'd seen a ghost. No, worse than that. He looked like he'd seen something that terrified him so completely that he couldn't even stay in the same room. Chuck flipped through his notebook, showing her the timeline he'd been working on. "I've been tracking the missing performers, Lucy. Every single one of them knew Depsey personally." Lucy studied the charts with growing alarm, her porcelain surface reflecting the kitchen light in fractured patterns. "Chuck, this is what I was afraid of. If Mr. Mystery and Dr. Dinglegreen are working together, and all these disappeared performers were connected to Depsey..." "You think he's in danger?" Chuck asked. "Or..." The unspoken alternative hung between them like a shadow. Lucy's reflection wavered in the kitchen window, creating the unsettling illusion that there were more people in the room than just the two of them. "I keep thinking about the way Depsey looked at Mr. Mystery during rehearsal," Lucy said carefully. "Not like someone meeting a stranger. Like someone who recognized a face from their nightmares." Chuck pulled out another notebook, his hands shaking slightly. "Lucy, I need to tell you exactly what happened at the poker game. Because after seeing how those two interacted with Depsey today, I think we're looking at something much worse than just missing performers." He described the evening in detail, the casual mention of Mr. Muffins, Depsey's violent reaction, the way he'd fled into the night. With each detail, Lucy's expression grew more troubled. "What if these aren't random disappearances?" Chuck said finally. "What if they're connected to whatever Mr. Mystery and Dr. Dinglegreen are really doing? And what if Depsey knows something about it that he's terrified to tell anyone?" "That's a very serious accusation you're dancing around," Lucy said softly. "I'm not accusing him of anything," Chuck said quickly. "But what if he's in danger? What if whoever's behind these disappearances has been threatening him? That would explain the fear, the nervousness, the way he guards his privacy so carefully." "Or," Lucy said even more quietly, "what if he knows something about these disappearances that he's afraid to tell anyone? Something that would put him, or us, in danger?" The possibilities settled over them like a cold fog. Chuck found himself looking toward his apartment's single window, where the distant glow of the rift painted the horizon in shades of blue and green that seemed more ominous than beautiful in the pre-dawn darkness. "There's only one way to find out," he said finally. "Chuck, no, whatever you're thinking." "His dressing room," Chuck continued, his natural curiosity overriding Lucy's protests. "You still have that master key from when you were cast representative, don't you? If Depsey's hiding something, if he's in some kind of trouble or has information about these disappearances, breaking into our friend's private space..." Lucy's voice carried scandalized disbelief. "Chuck, that's a violation of trust that I don't think our friendship could survive." "But what if his life depends on it?" Chuck leaned forward urgently. "Lucy, you saw his face. That wasn't just nervousness or stage fright. That was the look of someone who's been carrying a terrible secret for years. What if we're the only ones who can help him?" The Lucy remained silent, but Chuck could see the conflict playing out across her features. Her protective instincts warred with the growing certainty that something was deeply wrong with their friend. "And what if we're completely wrong?" she asked finally. "What if Depsey's just going through a difficult period or has personal issues he's not ready to share? We'd be destroying his trust for nothing." "Then we apologize and help him through whatever he's dealing with," Chuck said. "But Lucy, if we're right, if these disappearances are connected and Depsey knows something about them, then doing nothing could be worse than violating his privacy." By the time the cartoon world's artificial dawn began lightening the sky, they'd made their decision. Lucy's master key felt heavy in her pocket as they walked through the empty streets toward the Blame It on the Ink playhouse, their footsteps echoing strangely in the morning silence. The studio building looked different in the early light, larger somehow, its familiar architecture seeming to loom over them with an oppressive weight that made Chuck's cheerful optimism feel fragile and misplaced. The windows reflected the morning sky in ways that created the illusion of watching eyes, and their key rattled unnaturally loud in the empty corridors. "Second thoughts?" Lucy whispered as they approached Depsey's dressing room. Chuck paused with his hand on the door handle. The hallway stretched away from them in both directions, lined with doors that led to other performers' private spaces. Each door represented someone's personal sanctuary, their retreat from the demands of entertaining others. Violating that sanctuary felt like crossing a line they couldn't uncross. "If we're wrong about this, we'll make it right with him," Chuck said finally. "But if we're right, and we do nothing..." The lock clicked open with mechanical precision. Depsey's dressing room welcomed them with the familiar sense of grease paint and old wood, exactly as they'd seen it countless times before during friendly visits and cast meetings. The makeup mirror reflected their nervous faces, the costume rack held his familiar performance clothes, and the bookshelf dominated the far wall with its collection of scripts and acting manuals. But something was different tonight. On the floor just inside the door, a white envelope lay where it had been slipped underneath. Formal paper, expensive stock, addressed in flowing script. "Chuck, look at this," Lucy whispered, bending to retrieve the envelope before he could touch it. It's addressed to Mr. D. Rabbit, private consultation. Chuck crowded beside her as she carefully opened the unsealed envelope, revealing a single sheet of matching stationery. The formal script was precise, professional, carrying the weight of official correspondence. Mr. Rabbit, the Oculus situation has become problematic. His original personality breaks through during maintenance procedures, creating security concerns. Dr. Dinglegreen requires a more permanent solution. The hiking trail near the north side would provide excellent privacy for consultation about his condition. Please arrange this meeting within the week. Servants of the row job. Lucy's hands trembled as she held the letter, her voice barely audible. Chuck, what is this? What kind of consultation requires hiking trails and privacy? And what's a permanent solution to someone's original personality breaking through? Chuck's academic mind raced through the implications, connecting fragments from their earlier observations. Lucy, remember what we saw during that rehearsal with Dr. Dinglegreen? The way Oculus seemed to break through his enhancement and cry for help. The memory of Oculus's desperate plea. Help me! Someone please help me! I can't stop seeing. They're making me watch things, horrible things, took on new and terrible significance. Dr. Dinglegreen's casual dismissal of the breakdown, his treatment of Oculus as malfunctioning equipment rather than a suffering person, suddenly felt like evidence of something far more sinister than medical malpractice. Depsey's involved in this somehow, Lucy said, studying the formal signature. The same servants of the row job we glimpsed yesterday. But involved how? Is he helping them, or are they threatening him? Chuck moved toward the bookshelf with renewed urgency, running his hands along the edges where they'd discovered the hidden mechanism the day before. That's what we need to find out. Whatever's in that secret room. But before he could locate the concealed latch, his searching fingers found something else wedged behind the row of Shakespearean comedies. A small bottle, dark glass, nearly hidden in the shadows, where normal curiosity wouldn't think to look. Lucy, what do you think this is? He pulled the bottle free, holding it up to catch the dim light filtering through the window. The dark liquid inside moved strangely when tilted, swirling in patterns that seemed to follow rules other than simple gravity. Some kind of medicine? Lucy moved closer, studying the unmarked bottle with growing unease. But why hide it? And that smell? A strange chemical odor drifted from the bottle. Not unpleasant exactly, but wrong somehow. Artificial, like medicine mixed with something organic that had been sitting in darkness for too long. Chuck opened the bottle slightly to examine it more closely, and the smell intensified, making both of them feel oddly light-headed. The liquid caught the light in ways that defied normal physics, creating tiny whirlpools and spirals that mesmerized the eye. Chuck put it in his vest pocket and returned to the bookshelf. Chuck found the hidden latch behind the Shakespeare collection. The bookshelf swung inward with a soft click, revealing the narrow opening they'd discovered before. The secret room, Lucy breathed, but Chuck was already moving toward it, the visions driving him forward with supernatural urgency. What in the world? Chuck pulled out the flashlight they'd brought, clicking it on with trembling hands. The beam illuminated the hidden space clearly for the first time, walls covered with papers, charts, photographs spanning decades. And there, covering every surface, evidence of a conspiracy that stretched back generations. Missing persons reports, newspaper clippings about disappeared performers, photographs of Dr. Dinglegreen that showed him looking identical across different decades, letters signed "Servants of the Row Job" with increasingly specific instructions. But as Chuck stepped deeper into the room, higher mind raced. The flashlight flickered. Once, twice. No, 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 Chuck whispered frantically, slapping the flashlight against his palm. The flashlight flickered again, its beam growing weaker. Chuck, we need to get out of here, Lucy said urgently. But it was too late. With a final sputter, the flashlight went completely dark, plunging them into absolute blackness in the secret room filled with evidence of decades of systematic murder. Chuck, Lucy whispered in the darkness, her voice tight with fear. We have to go, now, before someone comes. Detective Bones's investigation. The police station felt different at 3 a.m. Quieter, more honest somehow, as if the building itself relaxed when the daytime bureaucrats went home. Detective Bones sat at his desk in the dim glow of his desk lamp. Case files spread before him like a paper graveyard of systematic failure. 20 years of missing persons reports. 20 years of rubber-stamping cases as routine departures and career relocations. 20 years of not asking the questions that might have saved lives. But Uncle Mortimer's disappearance had changed everything. Tell me again about the medical license, Detective Bones said to the pearl-white rotary telephone sitting on his desk, its elegant curves somehow comforting in the harsh fluorescent environment. Pearl's voice carried through the receiver with patient authority, the wisdom of someone who'd seen decades of information flow through official channels. Medical license issued 1823, renewed continuously for over 200 years. Same handwriting on all renewal applications. Same photograph submitted every decade. No aging, no changes in facial structure. Detective Bones studied the photocopied documents spread across his desk, each renewal form a perfect replica of the last, except for the date. Dr. Dinglegreen's sharp-featured face stared back at him from photographs spanning 2 centuries, the predatory smile identical in every image. And the missing persons pattern? Consistent methodology, Pearl replied, her voice carrying the precision of someone who'd spent years cataloging injustice. Initial contact with Dr. Dinglegreen for enhancement consultation. Period of apparent success and improved performance capabilities. Growing concerns about side effects or personality changes. Then disappearance, always reported as career opportunities elsewhere or personal family matters. Detective Bones leaned back in his chair, the metal creaking in the station's nighttime quiet. Through the windows, Cartoon City slept peacefully, unaware that its entertainment industry was built on a foundation of systematic elimination. How many total cases, Pearl? Over the past 200 years? Conservative estimate, 847 individuals. Missing persons reports filed on 312 of them. The rest simply vanished from records, as if they never existed. The numbers hit Detective Bones like physical blows. Not just Uncle Mortimer, not just the handful of cases he'd been tracking recently. Hundreds of cartoon characters spanning generations, all following the same pattern of enhancement, concern, and disappearance. What changed my uncle's case? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Same pattern, accelerated timeline, Pearl said gently. Dr. Dinglegreen's operation appears to be expanding rapidly. Less concern for maintaining normal waiting periods between stages, more aggressive recruitment, higher visibility targets. Detective Bones picked up the most recent photograph of Uncle Mortimer, a cheerful cartoon skeleton wearing his favorite bow tie, posing outside the library where he'd worked for 30 years. 3 weeks ago, he'd gone to Dr. Dinglegreen for a routine consultation about improving his library presentation skills. 2 weeks ago, he'd seemed more efficient, more organized, but somehow less himself. 1 week ago, he'd mentioned concerns about seeing things that weren't there and feeling watched by invisible eyes. 3 days ago, he'd vanished completely. Pearl, what do we know about the recent targets? The ones connected to the Blame It on the Ink playhouse? Interesting pattern emerging, Pearl replied, her tone shifting to professional analysis. Multiple performers from the same venue reporting for enhancement procedures. Unusual level of investment from external sources. Mr. Mystery's corporation has been funding extensive facility upgrades. Dr. Dinglegreen has acquired new equipment, expanded his operations significantly. Detective Bones pulled out another file, the one he'd been building on the Playhouse performers. Depsey the rabbit, Chuck the chatterbox, Lucy the teacup, along with dozens of other characters who worked in the cartoon entertainment industry. What about this Servants of the Road Job signature I found on some of the correspondence? Pearl was quiet for a moment, and Detective Bones could hear the soft whirring of mechanisms as she processed the question. That's where the trail gets concerning, Detective. No official records of any organization by that name. No business licenses, no incorporation papers, no tax filings, but the signature appears on documents spanning the entire 200-year period. Same handwriting? Identical. Either we're dealing with an organization that's maintained perfect consistency in its secretarial staff for 2 centuries, or we're looking at something that operates outside normal institutional frameworks. Detective Bones felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's night air conditioning. He'd been a cop for 40 years, had seen fraud, corruption, organized crime. But this suggested something that operated on a scale and timeline that challenged basic assumptions about how criminal enterprises functioned. Pearl, I need to ask you something, and I want your honest assessment. Always, Detective. Do you think we're dealing with normal criminal activity here? Or something else? Pearl's silence stretched longer this time. When she finally spoke, her voice carried undertones Detective Bones had never heard before. Something approaching fear. Detective, in my 15 years of processing information through official channels, I've learned to distinguish between cases that follow normal patterns and cases that don't. This doesn't follow normal patterns. What do you mean? The timeline is too long for normal human criminal organization. The consistency is too perfect for bureaucratic institutions. The scope is too broad for individual criminal enterprises. Either we're dealing with the most sophisticated criminal conspiracy in cartoon history, or we're dealing with something that operates according to rules we don't understand. Detective Bones stood up from his desk, pacing to the window that overlooked the peaceful city streets. In the distance, the rift's strange lights painted the horizon in colors that seemed more ominous than beautiful in the pre-dawn darkness. What's our next move? The pattern suggests the blame. It on the Ink Playhouse is the current center of operations, Pearl said. If we're going to gather evidence that can't be buried by bureaucratic channels, that's where we need to focus our investigation. Detective Bones checked his watch. 4:15 a.m. Still early enough to observe without being observed, late enough that most legitimate activity would have ended. I'm going to take a look at the theater, he said, gathering his files and sliding them into his jacket. If Dr. Dinglegreen and this Mr. Mystery are operating there might be evidence that hasn't been sanitized by official channels yet. Be careful, Detective, Pearl said, her voice carrying genuine concern. Whatever we're dealing with, it's survived for 200 years by eliminating threats to its operations. Uncle Mortimer wasn't the first person to get too close to the truth. Detective Bones picked up Pearl's elegant form, her pearl-white surface warm and reassuring in his skeletal hands. That's exactly why we can't let this continue. If we don't stop it now, how many more Uncle Mortimers disappear before someone else decides to investigate? The drive to the theater district took him through empty streets that felt different than they should at this hour. Not peaceful, watchful, as if the very buildings were aware of his investigation and evaluating whether he posed a threat to something they protected. The Blame It on the Ink Playhouse loomed in the darkness, its familiar architecture somehow more imposing without the usual crowds and cheerful lighting. Detective Bones parked across the street, studying the building for signs of activity. Most of the windows were dark, but on the second floor, a faint light glowed from what looked like one of the dressing rooms. Someone was inside the building at an hour when all legitimate business should have ended. Pearl, do you see that light? I see it, Detective. That would be consistent with after-hours meetings, private consultations, or evidence disposal activities. Detective Bones felt his professional instincts take over, the methodical approach to investigation that had served him well in simpler cases. I'm going to take a closer look. If there are after-hours activities happening, this might be our chance to observe operations without official interference. He crossed the street quietly, his skeletal frame allowing him to move with less noise than living investigators. The building's main entrances were locked, but his police access gave him legitimate authority to investigate suspicious late-night activities in commercial buildings. As he approached the stage door, he could hear voices from inside, muffled, but definitely multiple people moving around in areas that should have been empty. One voice carried the artificial cheerfulness of Chuck the Chatterbox. Another carried Lucy the Teacup's gentle tones. Both sounded stressed, nervous, engaged in activity they didn't want to be caught doing. Detective Bones tested the stage door. Unlocked. Either someone had been careless or someone was planning to leave quickly if necessary. The corridors inside were dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting shadows that made the familiar theatrical environment feel more ominous than welcoming. The voices were coming from the direction of the dressing rooms, along with sounds that suggested they were searching for something. As Detective Bones moved quietly through the hallway, Pearl's voice whispered from his jacket, "Detective, this could be the break we need. If those performers are investigating the same patterns we are, they might have information that confirms our theories. Or they might be part of the conspiracy," Detective Bones replied quietly. "Either way, we need to know what they're doing here." The light was coming from a dressing room marked D. Rabbit, Depsey's private space. The door was ajar, and through the gap, Detective Bones could see Chuck and Lucy moving around inside with nervousness, but the sort that concerned friends share. Detective Bones had a long and careful career dealing with lies and truth. He could tell there was something in Chuck and Lucy's demeanor. Pearl's voice whispered urgently from his pocket, "Detective, whatever's happening in there, these performers aren't our enemies. They're seeing the same truth we are." Detective Bones made his decision. Instead of observing from hiding, he would reveal himself and find out if Chuck and Lucy could be allies in an investigation that was clearly beyond the scope of normal police work. He knocked firmly on the dressing room door. "Police, open up immediately!" The sounds inside stopped abruptly, followed by frantic whispering and what sounded like someone trying to hide evidence. After a moment, the door opened to reveal Lucy's nervous face, with Chuck visible behind her. "Want to explain what you're doing here so late tonight?" Detective Bones asked, stepping into the room and immediately noticing the strange chemical smell that hung in the air like evidence of something that shouldn't exist. Whatever Chuck and Lucy had discovered in Depsey's dressing room, it was connected to the same impossible conspiracy that had been claiming victims for 200 years, and Detective Bones was finally going to get the answers that official channels had been hiding for decades.